Welcome back. Today's story filled with drama and unexpected turns. Hit like, subscribe, and let's jump in.
Lila sat on the bed, smiling up at Jace as he stood in front of her. She reached for his shirt, pulling it free from his pants, unbuttoning it, and letting it fall to the floor. She kissed him softly, starting from his stomach and moving to his chest while Jace closed his eyes, letting out a quiet moan. Lila leaned back with a grin as Jace gripped her shoulders for balance. Then, he fell onto the bed, gasping for air. Taking advantage of the moment, Lila quickly slipped out of her clothes and lay next to him, her hand still tangled in his hair. She guided Jace further up the bed and kissed him deeply before locking eyes with him. "No more teasing," she said firmly. "I need you now." Jace didn't need to be told twice. He held himself planted deep inside of her for a few seconds before collapsing exhausted onto the bed next to her. Both of them just laid there gasping for air. They lay there resting for a few minutes before they got up, took a shower in their guest bathroom, and got dressed to go back to work. Before they left the room, Lila pulled Jace in for one last kiss. "Listen, that was amazing, but we can't do this again," Lila said. "You said that last week too, but you know you can't get enough of this," Jace replied. "I know, but Zara is acting funny, and I think she may be getting suspicious. And that whole deal with your ex-wife trying to call you last week has got me a little nervous. While this may be amazing, I'm not willing to ruin my marriage for a little intimacy, no matter how good it is," Lila continued. "Okay, I hear you," Jace replied. "You're right, we need to take a break for a while until things settle down. I don't want to lose Nina either." At that point, I had seen enough. I picked up my laptop and slammed it against the nearest wall. This cheating bastard was going to pay, and if I ever got my hands on this jerk, he was going to die a slow, painful death. But before I killed him, my office door opened just slightly. My assistant, Maya, hesitantly stuck her head in and asked, "Are you okay, Mr. Hale?" Taking a deep breath, I replied, "Yes, Maya, I'm fine. I'm sorry if I frightened you. I think I'm going to leave for the day and head to the gym. I have some things that I need to work through, and I think a hard workout may help me. Oh, and Maya, could you call IT and see about getting me a new laptop?" I added. "Yes, sir, Mr. Hale. I'll get on that right away." With that, I grabbed my coat and headed out the door. I guess I should introduce myself. I'm Grant Hale, and that was my wife of almost 20 years in that video. We met in college, and after dating for 2 years, we married just after graduation. As far as I knew, we had a great marriage for all of those years, and 3 great kids. I guess I was wrong. This all started a few days ago when Amelia Parker, Jace's wife, came to see me, concerned that there was something going on between her husband and my wife. If not for her, I would still be oblivious to what was going on right under my nose in my own house. 3 days earlier, Maya had said to me, "Mr. Hale, I have a Mrs. Parker in the lobby to see you. She said that her husband, Jace, works with your wife and that it was urgent that she see you." "Thank you, Maya." "Did she say what this was about?" "No, sir, she just said it was personal." "Tell her I'll be there in a few minutes," I said. I had a bad feeling about this. Why would a woman that I had only met once at a company event May's party be coming to see me about a personal issue? It was only 9 a.m., and I had done nothing all day but put out fires. And now this. What's worse is that it was only Friday. Maybe it was time to scrap my rule of no drinking until after 5 p.m. I walked into the lobby and saw a pretty brunette sitting on the sofa. "Mrs. Parker, I'm Grant Hale. Please come back to my office, and we can talk." "Thank you, but please call me Amelia," she said as she stood to shake my hand. "Okay, well, follow me, Amelia, and please call me Grant," I replied as I led her around the corner into my office and shut the door. "Please have a seat and tell me what's on your mind," I said as I motioned to the sofa in the corner of the office. As she crossed the room, I couldn't help but notice how beautiful she was. Amelia Parker had shoulder-length auburn hair, and while some would say she was 10 to 15 pounds overweight, to me, she had curves in all the right places. I took a seat in one of the chairs facing the sofa and noticed that her hands were shaking as she tried to collect her thoughts. "Grant, I don't really know how to say this, so I'm just going to be blunt. I believe that my husband is having an affair with your wife, and I was hoping you could help me prove it." I don't know if you have suspected anything, but I can show you what I know, and we can start from there if that's okay with you. Wow, I thought. Not only was she beautiful, but she was also certifiably crazy. I didn't know her husband very well, but I did know my wife, and the last thing she would ever do was cheat on me and our kids. But I could tell that the only way I was going to get out of this situation was to listen to what she had to say and try to convince her that she was being paranoid. Well, Amelia, please excuse my skepticism, but that is really hard to believe. But show me what you have, and let's see where it leads us, I told her. She took a couple of deep breaths to calm herself and collect her thoughts before she began. Okay, last Friday, I was in town running some errands and decided to surprise Jace at the office and see if he wanted to grab some lunch. But when I got to his office, he wasn't there. I asked around, and was told that he left for lunch around 9:30 a.m. I thought that was strange since I packed him a lunch that morning, like I do every day. So thinking that maybe he was running some errands, I tried to call him to see if he wanted to meet me somewhere, but he didn't answer. I could see the tears forming in the corner of her eyes when she paused for a minute. At this point, I'm thinking I really need to get her through this story and out of here before the waterworks start. I handed her a box of tissues from the table and asked, "So, where does Nina come into this?" She wiped her eyes and nose before she continued. When he still hadn't returned my call by the time I got home, I was starting to get a little worried because that just wasn't like him. Then it hit me. About 6 months ago, when our oldest daughter, Sienna, started driving, I downloaded one of those apps that tracks your location by your cell phone on all of our phones. I knew that it also tracked mine and Jace's phones, so I pulled up the app and found his location. It was an address about 15 minutes from his office in a neighborhood I didn't recognize. When I searched for that address online, your name came up, and I remembered you and your wife from the event May's party. I still wasn't convinced that Nina and Jace were having an affair, but this was certainly suspicious. I would have to ask Nina about this later. So, Grant, I asked, did you ask Jace why he was at my house in the middle of the day? No, but let me finish, she said. This app also tracks everywhere you've been for the past 60 days, so I pulled up Jace's history and found that he had been going to your house every Saturday for the past 2 weeks. He would leave his office at 9:30 a.m. and arrive at your house around 11:15 a.m. He would stay there until around 11:45 a.m., and then drive back to his office. That's when I knew what was going on. When I asked him that evening why he hadn't called me back, he told me that he was with a client. I can't think of but one reason why he would lie to me, she added, her voice shaky with emotion. I could feel the rage boiling up in me as she spoke, but thankfully I caught myself before I exploded on her. Amelia was just the messenger, and she was obviously hurting enough. It was my turn to take a few deep breaths and compose myself. Then it hit me. The history on my security system could confirm if she was correct. So I pulled up the system on my phone app and scrolled back 2 weeks. And there it was. Nina had disarmed the system at 11:15 a.m. and rearmed it at 11:45 a.m. I then scrolled through to find corresponding entries at the same times for the next 2 Saturdays but found nothing suspicious prior to 3 weeks ago. Amelia just sat there quietly crying while I paced the floor trying to figure out what to do. Then it hit me, I needed photographic proof of whatever was going on before we confronted either spouse. I picked up the phone and called my friend, Ian Wright. Hey Ian, I know it's spur of the moment, but could you come over to my office as soon as possible? I have an urgent matter that I need your help with. Ian confirmed that he would be here in about 10 minutes. I explained to Amelia that Ian was my security system contractor. I develop residential and commercial properties, and Ian installs the security in all of my projects, including my house. My plan was to get photographic proof of whatever was going on before we confronted either spouse. Ian arrived as promised, and after I told him the situation, he laid out for me exactly what we needed to do. Just be sure this is what you want, Grant. Once you see the pictures, you'll never be able to fully get those images out of your head. I looked at Amelia, and she nodded in agreement. Let's do this, Ian, I said. Let the pieces fall where they may. Ian explained that my current security system wouldn't be much help. The cameras inside the house were motion activated, but they only activated when the system was armed. This was designed to ensure privacy. However, Ian could install some really small, high-definition cameras in whichever rooms I chose that would give us crystal clear video and audio of everything going on in those rooms. I gave him the go-ahead, and he promised to get everything installed the next day after Nina left for work. The plan was to install 3 cameras each in the master bedroom, the guest bedroom, and the great room. Ian promised that he could set them up so that we would get a 360-degree view of everything in those rooms. The cameras would be motion-activated and capable of automatically filtering the light to get perfect pictures at any time, day or night. The cameras transmitted a signal to a receiver that Ian installed in my attic, and I could watch them via a phone app. The video would also be saved in the cloud in case I needed it in the future. Now, all we had to do was keep our cool for a couple of days and see what we found out. That was a lot harder to do than I imagined, but I kept myself busy with work and even worked from my home office in the evenings after dinner to avoid any lengthy conversations with Nina. Amelia had it a little easier. Her kids were still at home, so she stayed busy with their activities. With 2 teenage boys, she was running around with them, and as was normal, she barely had a moment alone with Jace in the evenings. At my house, it was only me and Nina, so it was a little harder. All of our kids were off at college. Our daughter Aria was a senior, and our twin boys, Leo and Oscar, were sophomores. They all attended the same college where Nina and I met. I spent most of Tuesday and Wednesday evenings alone in my office trying to figure out how to tell Nina about all of this. Finally, Saturday arrived. That morning, Nina kissed me goodbye when I left, just like she did every other day. From her actions, this was just like any other day for the past 20 years. Since Friday, I had been trying to remember any strange changes in her behavior over the past 3 weeks, and there really wasn't much there. The only thing that stood out was that it seemed she had been a lot more aggressive in bed on the weekends. She was normally a follower and let me lead the way, but she had started taking charge more in the bedroom. I remember really liking it until I found out the reason for the change. So that brings us to today. After the 2 lovebirds left my house, I downloaded the video to my laptop, emailed a copy to Amelia Parker, and sat down to watch it in my office. Now I just had to figure out what to do next, preferably something that doesn't land me in jail. On my way to the gym, I called Victor Harris, my attorney, and explained everything to him. He said he would draw up divorce papers, filing on the basis of adultery. Normally in our state, it takes around 12 months to complete a divorce, but there is a loophole for adultery that allows you to finalize it in just 3 months. I had no plans to draw this out. I also made one more call to my good friend, Elliot Davis, who just happens to be the area vice president at the bank where both Nina and Jace Parker worked. I had used Elliot to finance almost all of my projects over the past 20 years, and he owed me a lot of favors. I intended to collect on a few of those favors now. I explained what was going on and told him I would send him the evidence and expressed my confidence that he would handle things appropriately for 2 employees engaged in a sexually inappropriate relationship during work hours. He assured me that he would take care of everything and that I would be totally satisfied with his actions. 2 hours later, after a long, hard workout and a shower, I couldn't put this off any longer. I had to face Nina at some point. On my way home, I played a musical playlist on my phone and tried to use some of the techniques I had learned years earlier while preparing for big business meetings. These techniques had always helped me clear my mind and focus with laser-like precision on the task at hand. I pulled into the garage and parked in my usual spot. Before heading into the house, I found Nina in the kitchen, working on dinner, just like every night. "Hi, honey, how was your day?" she asked, smiling at me over her shoulder. "Shitty," I grunted as I dropped my briefcase and headed to the bar for a drink. "Oh, honey, I'm sorry. Is there anything I can do to help?" she asked. "As a matter of fact, you can," I replied. "Take a break and come into the den with me for a second. I have something I need you to look at." She came in and slid in beside me on the sofa, rubbing my thigh with her hand. "Okay, baby, so what exactly is it that you want to show me?" she asked. I took out my phone and pulled up the video app, turned the volume up to the maximum, and hit play. I handed her my phone. She watched the black screen for a second, and then a look of horror enveloped her face as she saw herself and Jace. "Oh," she mumbled, then panic set in as the scene unfolded on my phone. "No, baby." "Oh no," she cried out, dropping my phone on the floor. "Baby, I can explain. It's not what you think," she pleaded. That was it. At that moment, all of my patience and self-control was suddenly gone and replaced with all of the hurt I had experienced over the past week. I just exploded. What the hell is it that you want to explain? You don't have to explain a damn thing to me. The video was pretty clear. It was blatantly obvious that I'm married to a lying, cheating woman who obviously cares more about herself and some pencil-neck idiot than she does about the man who has loved her for 20 years, or her children. Is there anything else that you would like to explain? When I calmed myself down, I noticed that she was sobbing into her hands. Please, Grant, I know I screwed up bad, but please don't call me those horrible names. I am so sorry. Can I make it up to you somehow? Call you names? I'm not calling you names. I'm just stating the facts. Lying. Yep, that's what you've been doing since you started your affair with that asshole. Cheating. Yep. Yep, I think that video proves that. Once again, refer to the video, dear. Please explain how I'm calling you names. As far as being sorry, the only thing you're sorry about is getting caught. You sure as hell didn't look sorry while you were screwing that jerk. My face was flushed, and I could feel my heart racing in my chest. I closed my eyes and took some deep breaths to calm myself before I had a heart attack. When I opened my eyes, Nina was curled up in a fetal position, sobbing. Okay, Grant, I whispered to myself, get it together. Just explain the options to her and get the hell out of here. Listen, Nina, I started, I just want you to be clear on your options. At this point, Victor is drawing up divorce papers as we speak. You will be served with those next week, and you need to take those to a lawyer and have him review them. I think I am being very fair in what I am offering, half the equity in the house, half the retirement accounts, and $2,800 per month for 12 months. You've got 2 weeks to sign them to avoid going to court, where I will be forced to play that video for the whole world to see, including our kids and your parents. It's your choice. Now I'm going to leave, so please do not call me, do not text me, do not email me. In fact, if you see me around town, please turn in the opposite direction because I don't even want to see your face. Is that clear? With that, I got up, went upstairs, packed some clothes, and headed to my car. I'll send someone to get the rest of my things. You can stay here until the divorce is final. I can't stand the thought of being in this house after the way you've defiled it, I added, then paused and looked back for a moment at my home of 20 years before I slammed the door, leaving her sobbing on the sofa. When I left my house, I drove straight to the apartment that my assistant Maya had arranged for me. Over the past few years, every time my company developed an apartment complex, I began including 4 to 5 furnished apartments in each development to rent as short-term executive apartments. Our area had a lot of foreign companies, and many of them had managers from their home offices come to town for several months at a time. These units had been very popular with these companies and normally rented for about 4 times the normal lease rate of the other units in the complex. Who would have ever thought at the time that I would end up living in one of these units? I opened the door and dropped my bags in the entryway before collapsing into one of the chairs in the living area, suddenly feeling really exhausted. Just then, my phone buzzed. Who the hell keeps calling? I pulled the phone out of my pocket and saw 12 missed calls, 8 from Nina, 2 from my daughter Olivia, and 1 each from my sons, Henry and Leland. What part of "don't call me" does this woman not understand? I quickly deleted all of Nina's calls before hitting the button to call my daughter back. Daddy, are you okay? Olivia answered. Baby, I'm fine. What's going on? I replied. Well, Mom called about an hour ago looking for you. She sounded really upset, and when I asked her what was wrong, she said you guys had some kind of fight and that you stormed out of the house and won't answer her calls. She said she's tried to call you, but that you won't answer your phone. That doesn't sound like you, so I got scared that something might have happened to you. Well, that didn't take long, I thought. That's probably why the boys are calling as well. Olivia, I can assure you that nothing has happened to me. What your mother failed to tell you was that we were fighting because she decided that I wasn't good enough for her, so she found herself another man and started sneaking him into the house at lunchtime to have sex with him. So it wasn't exactly a fight, it was more like I'm divorcing her, and I never want to see her again. Now she thinks she can explain it all away if I'll just listen to her, but it'll be a cold day in hell before I listen to any more of her lies. I suddenly realized that I was yelling at my daughter, so I paused to catch my breath. It was then that I heard her crying on the other end. Well, I obviously didn't handle that very well, did I? I told myself. I was able to get my emotions in check and went on to explain everything to Olivia. I made sure to let her know that I didn't want this to come between her and her mother. This was between Nina and me. I wanted her to understand that this didn't affect her relationship with either of us. After I hung up with Olivia, I called Henry and Leland and let each of them know what was going on as well. Unfortunately for Nina, they both inherited my temper, and they were both really pissed at their mother. When we hung up, they'd eventually make peace with her, but she would get a lot of rage from them before everything settled down. The next few weeks passed by fairly quietly. I buried myself in my work in the gym and tried to stay too busy to think about the storm my life had become. My only social contacts outside of work were my kids and Amelia Parker. I talked to the kids several times each week. Henry and Leland kept the conversations to school and sports. Olivia would catch me up on what was happening with her, but she would also try to bring up Nina, who, according to my daughter, was not doing well at all. Amelia and I met for lunch every Friday. It was probably not the best move given our circumstances, but we both needed someone to talk to, and no one else really understood what we were going through. I was moving full speed ahead with the divorce from Nina, but Amelia was having second thoughts. It was different for her. She still had children at home, and a divorce would be much messier for her and Jace. She would often use me as a sounding board about the decision she was facing. On the last day before her deadline, Victor informed me that Nina had finally signed the papers and returned them to his office. Now it was just a matter of waiting the 3 months for a court date to finalize the agreement. The only request Nina had made was that I let her talk to me before we went to court. Despite my objections, Victor made it clear that things would go much smoother in court if I met with her. He said that most judges would not look favorably on a spouse who was ending a 23-year marriage without any kind of counseling or at least some honest discussions between the two parties. I finally agreed to meet with her, but it would be when I was ready. Over the next month, I reverted back to the way I was before I met Nina. I worked hard, I worked out like a madman, and I played hard. My business required me to be out of town for a couple of nights each week, and most of those nights included dinner and drinks, usually at a bar after work. I am a creature of habit, so this was a pattern that I had followed for years. But normally, I would eat, have a couple of drinks, have some conversations with whomever was sitting near me at the bar, and then head to my room to call Nina and the kids. There would sometimes be some harmless flirting with some of the women patrons, but it never went beyond that. I'm not proud to admit it, but since Nina blew up our marriage by cheating on me, I was drinking more than I should when I was on the road. The harmless flirting got out of hand and wasn't so harmless anymore. I ended up hooking up with a few of the women I met while traveling. Some were single, and some were married, but I didn't really care. Their marriages were not my problem. I was furious with Nina for what she did, and I hated Jace for involving himself in my marriage, but now I had allowed myself to do the same thing to other men's marriages. I was searching for anything to make the hurting go away, but nothing seemed to work. During this time, Amelia and I continued to meet for lunch each week. We had even gone out on a few dates in the evenings. We didn't call them dates, but we were both lonely, and sometimes you just need to spend time with a friendly face. It was certainly more satisfying to me than the one-night stands. There was no sexual relationship, but I had kissed her goodnight a few times, lingering a little longer than I probably should have. Amelia and I were out for dinner one Friday night, and I noticed that she was quieter than usual, and that she was just playing with her food. There was obviously something on her mind. She finally stopped and looked me in the eye. Grant, as you know, we've been out a few times lately, and whether we call it what it is or not, they've basically been dates, and I know it's been a little awkward the last few times. When we said goodbye, it was like we both wanted more than just a kiss, but we were afraid to let things go any farther. So, I wanted you to know that I think I really need for things to, how do I put this, move a little farther along, at least physically. So I'm just going to come out and ask you something. I'll understand if you say no, but if I don't ask you now, I'll lose my nerve. The way she was acting had me more than a little nervous, but finally, I just said, go ahead. You know you can ask me anything. Okay, here goes. As you know, Jace and I were high school sweethearts, and before all of this, we had only been with each other when it came to sex. I'm not really sure whether I can give him a second chance or not. Some days I want to try, and some days I just want a fresh start on my own. But I'm still a woman, and I still have certain needs, if you know what I mean, and I think you probably have some of those needs. I just nodded to let her know that I understood, as she paused to collect her thoughts. So, what I wanted to ask you was if you would be willing to help me take care of those needs. I know that sounds crazy, but there's no way I could ever just pick up a stranger and go to bed with him. But you're my friend, and I trust you. Don't worry about hurting my feelings if you say no. I will understand, but I really think this is something that I need. And maybe it would be good for you too. For once in my life, I was speechless. That was the last question I ever expected to be asked. I carefully thought about how to respond before speaking. Amelia, wow. I'm certainly flattered that you would feel comfortable enough to ask me to help you with this. Please don't take my hesitation to mean that I'm not interested. I think you are absolutely beautiful, and I've been attracted to you since you first walked into my office. My first instinct is to scream yes at the top of my lungs, but I really just need some time to think through all of the ramifications before I give you a final answer. How about if I call you in the morning with my answer? I suggested. Sure, I understand, Amelia replied. I know this is a huge favor I'm asking, and I can certainly understand if you decide not to do it. I just didn't know who else I could come to. After that, we finished eating and talked a little more before it was time to go. I promised to call her first thing in the morning with my answer. At some level of my soul, I knew I was going to do it. As soon as she asked, hell, I had been imagining what it would be like to be with her for weeks now. I just needed to convince myself that I could do this and then walk away from her. I knew that if, after this, she decided to commit to her marriage, I couldn't see her anymore, not even for lunch. It came to me on my way home that evening that maybe this could help us both move on. So, I called her. Hello, she answered. Hey, Amelia. This is Grant. I've thought about what you asked, and my answer is yes, on one condition. There was a pause on the other end of the line before she asked, cautiously, so, what is this condition? Well, I said, if we just met at my apartment or at your house and had sex, it would just feel like a one-night stand. I need something more from you to feel comfortable doing this. So, the condition is this: I think a change of scenery would do us both some good. If you will agree to go away with me this weekend, I will agree to have sex with you at some point over that time. We could leave on Friday and come back late Friday. Wow. Count me in, she replied. I was so sure you were going to say no. I'll just tell Jace that I need to get away to clear my head, and that he needs to watch the kids for a few days. What time do you want to leave? I'll text you with the plans tomorrow, and Amelia, I'm really looking forward to this. Bye. The next day, as soon as Maya got into work, I had her make all the reservations for the weekend. I texted Amelia and told her to meet me at the airport at noon on Friday. In spite of all of her questions, I insisted that everything was a surprise and she would just have to wait until Friday to find out the details. After an agonizingly slow week, here I was standing in front of the terminal when I saw her walking toward me, wearing a pair of tight faded jeans, boots, and a form-fitting sweater that accentuated her full breasts. You look amazing, I said. By the time we board our flight, I'll be the envy of every man in this airport. She leaned in to give me a hug and whispered in my ear, if you keep talking like that, you won't make it to that plane, mister. So, what's the big surprise? Where exactly are you taking me, Mr. Hale? She asked with a teasing smile. I just smiled as I handed her the ticket. Denver. You've got to be kidding me, she exclaimed. I've always wanted to go there. Well, Mrs. Parker, you'll be pleased to know that we have reservations at some very fine restaurants for the next 3 nights and tickets to see Phantom of the Opera on Broadway tomorrow night. I grabbed her bag and headed to check in with a very happy lady at my side. After a smooth flight, we landed at Denver International Airport and took a cab to our hotel. It was one of my favorites, located across from City Park, with our room looking out over the park. It was just after 5 p.m. when we checked into the hotel. We quickly unpacked and put away our bags before freshening up for dinner. Our reservations were for 7 p.m., and the restaurant was only a 10-minute walk from the hotel, so we had plenty of time. Amelia was standing by the window, staring out at the city while I tied my tie. When I walked up beside her, she turned and wrapped her arms around me. Well, Mr. Hale, she said, I asked for one small favor, and you took it to a completely different level than anything I could have imagined. This is absolutely amazing. I could be mistaken, but I'm thinking that all of this may have just entitled you to the girlfriend experience this weekend. That's what I was hoping for, Mrs. Parker, I replied as I pulled her closer and gently kissed her. After a few seconds, I pulled away. We better stop this now and head to dinner, or we're never going to make it. Because I'm getting really close to just throwing you on that bed and having you for dinner. We made the 10-minute walk to the restaurant, hand in hand, while taking in the sights and sounds of the city. The dinner was amazing, just like I remembered it from the last time I was here. After dessert and way too much wine, we headed back to the hotel. When we got back to the room, I could tell that she was getting nervous, so I took both of her hands in mine and looked directly into her eyes. I want you to know that we won't do anything that you are not comfortable with. If all you want to do is act like tourists and enjoy the city, that's fine with me. If you want to go through with your original request, that's fine too. I just want you to relax and enjoy the weekend. No pressure, okay? I led her over to the window, moving behind her and wrapping my arms around her waist. I want you to look out at this beautiful city. This weekend is all about you. I want you to experience things you never have before. Just try to relax and let me take care of everything. I want you to experience the food, the sights, the attractions, and the arts. Let's just enjoy the city, and if you want to explore some casual sex between friends, I will be more than happy to make that happen. I could see the tears forming in the corner of her eyes. No, Grant, she whispered. I really want to go through with this, and I need it more than you'll ever know. I'm just really nervous. I've only been with one man, and after all that's happened, I just feel so inadequate, because I obviously wasn't able to keep him satisfied. Listen, Amelia, I said, I think we're both in the same place. We both feel inadequate in a number of ways, but what they did is not about us. No matter what was lacking in our marriages, they didn't have the right to go outside of the marriages looking for answers. They should have addressed those with us. If anyone is inadequate, it's the two of them. Now enough about them, let's just enjoy being here and being with each other for the next few days. With that, I gently kissed the back of her neck, just behind her right ear. Amelia closed her eyes and leaned back into me, tilting her head, inviting me to continue. Amelia closed her eyes and leaned back into me, tilting her head to invite me to continue. I could feel her body relax against mine as I traced gentle kisses along the side of her neck, moving lower with each kiss. My hands caressed her sides, brushing lightly over the curve of her waist before resting on her hips. Her breath was shallow, and I could feel her pulse quicken beneath my touch. As I gently pulled her closer, I whispered into her ear, let's just forget about everything for now. We're here, in this beautiful city, and this moment is ours. Just let go and enjoy it. Amelia's hands slowly moved to my chest, then up to my shoulders, pulling me closer as she turned her head to face me. Our lips met in a soft, lingering kiss. For a moment, the rest of the world disappeared, and there was only the warmth of her body and the closeness we shared. The kiss deepened, and I felt a rush of excitement as I felt her response. She pulled back slightly and smiled at me, her eyes reflecting a mix of desire and vulnerability. I've been waiting for this, she murmured, her voice soft yet full of intent. I smiled back, brushing a lock of hair from her face. So have I replied. We moved toward the bed, the tension between us building with each step. Amelia's hand slipped under my shirt, and she pulled it off, revealing my bare chest. I paused for a moment, allowing myself to take in her gaze. She wasn't just admiring me, she was connecting with me in a way that felt more than physical, and that made everything feel different. This wasn't just about sex, it was about reclaiming something from the wreckage of our pasts. She leaned in, pressing her lips against my chest, and I could feel the heat between us rising. Every touch, every kiss seemed to strip away the layers of doubt and hesitation that had built up over the past few weeks. After a moment, Amelia stopped and looked up at me. Are you sure about this? She asked quietly, her voice trembling slightly. Absolutely, I answered, brushing my fingers gently over her cheek. We're here because we want to be, no regrets, no looking back. Just us. With that, she nodded and pulled me down onto the bed, her body pressing against mine. The moment was electric, charged with everything we had been through, the pain, the betrayal, the longing for something more. We let go of everything in that moment. The next few hours passed in a blur, filled with laughter, whispered words, and the soft sounds of the city drifting in from outside. We spent the evening enjoying each other's company, taking in the sights and the atmosphere of the city that never slept. After a delicious dinner at one of the city's most renowned restaurants, we went back to our hotel, where the rest of the night unfolded in an intimacy neither of us had expected but both had craved. Later that evening, as we lay in bed, I looked over at Amelia, who was lying on her side, her head resting on her hand, watching me. "You know, Grant, I really needed this weekend. I needed to feel alive again," she said, her voice soft but sincere. I nodded, my fingers gently brushing over her arm. "I think we both did. We've been through so much, but sometimes it takes a step away from everything to put things into perspective." She smiled. "I'm glad we did this." "Me too," I replied, pulling her closer to me. We drifted off to sleep in each other's arms, the events of the past week starting to feel like distant memories, replaced by the sense of relief and connection we'd found in each other. The next morning, we woke up early to explore the city, and as we walked hand in hand through City Park, I couldn't help but feel a sense of peace, despite everything that had happened. There were no clear answers yet, no certainty about where Amelia and I would go from here, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in the right place. We had breakfast at a small cafe near the park, enjoying the simple pleasure of good food and good conversation. It was easy to talk with Amelia, and it felt natural, like we had known each other much longer than we actually had. In some ways, I realized that this weekend had been as much about finding myself as it was about finding solace with her. After breakfast, we spent the afternoon touring museums and shops. Amelia loved the art galleries, and I loved watching her face light up as she walked through the exhibits. She had a passion for the arts that was contagious, and it felt good to be in the moment, to experience something new without the weight of my marriage and the pain of betrayal clouding my mind. By the time we headed back to the hotel, it was late afternoon, and we were both exhausted. We stopped at a cafe for a drink before heading to the airport. The weekend had been exactly what we needed, a brief escape from reality, but reality was waiting for both of us. We said our goodbyes at the airport, with Amelia promising to stay in touch. I knew we both needed some time to process everything, but there was a mutual understanding between us that things had changed. The flight back was quiet. My mind was racing with thoughts of what had happened over the past few days. The mix of emotions was overwhelming: guilt, relief, anger, confusion, but beneath it all, there was one thing I knew for certain: I had to face the consequences of everything I had done. I couldn't deny that the weekend had given me a sense of clarity. Amelia and I had connected on a deeper level, but I wasn't sure if the connection was something that could last beyond this weekend. I didn't know if she was looking for more or if it was just an escape from the chaos in her own life. I couldn't focus too much on that right now, though. I had bigger things to deal with. As I landed and got into my car, I knew I had to confront the situation with Nina head-on. I had put off meeting her for long enough. The divorce papers had been signed, but there was still the matter of closure. It wasn't just about ending our marriage, it was about finally putting an end to the lies, the betrayal, and the silence that had built up between us. I arrived home later that evening, but the house felt empty. Even though it was still my house, it no longer felt like my home. I could feel the weight of everything that had happened, pressing down on me as I entered. Nina wasn't there. I wasn't surprised, she had probably gone out to try and distract herself. But I wasn't going to run away from this any longer. I couldn't. I sat down in the living room, staring at the empty walls, the echo of our once happy life still lingering in the air. I had spent the last few weeks trying to figure out what went wrong. I had blamed myself, blamed Nina, blamed Jace. But in the end, it wasn't about blame. It was about understanding what had happened and how we got here. Just then, the door opened, and Nina walked in. She stopped when she saw me sitting there, her face stiffening. "Grant," she said quietly, her voice tentative. "Nina," I replied, my voice firm. "We need to talk." She closed the door behind her and walked into the living room, standing a few feet away from me. There was a long pause before she spoke again. "I'm sorry," she said, her eyes brimming with tears. "I know that doesn't fix anything, but I'm truly sorry for what I did to you. For what I did to us." I didn't respond immediately. I had heard those words before, too many times to count. But this time, I could see the sincerity in her eyes. "I've been seeing a counselor," Nina continued, her voice shaky. "Trying to understand why I did what I did. I've been so lost, Grant. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just want you to know that I regret everything. I couldn't bring myself to speak at first. The anger, the hurt, the betrayal, it was all still so fresh, but it wasn't just about what she had done to me. It was about the family we had built together and the damage we had done to it. The pain wasn't just mine, it was for our kids, too. How long, Nina? I finally asked, my voice low but steady. How long did this go on behind my back? How many times did you let me believe everything was fine when you were out there lying to me? She looked down, her face flushed with shame. It started out innocent. Just lunch, talking, but then it turned into something else. I never meant for it to get out of hand. But it did. Did you love him? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Part of me didn't want to hear it, but I needed to know. No, she said quickly. I didn't love him. I was lonely. And I made a horrible mistake. I should have come to you, Grant. I should have told you how I was feeling instead of hiding it and pushing you away. But I didn't, and now it's too late. There was a moment of silence between us, the weight of her words hanging in the air. I could see her regret, but the bitterness inside me wasn't ready to fade just yet. I've made my peace with this, Nina, I said, my voice cold but calm. I'm done. I can't continue to live in this toxic mess. I've tried, but I can't be the only one trying to make this work. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I understand, Grant. I really do. I wish I could change everything, but I can't. All I can do is apologize and hope that someday you'll be able to forgive me. I stood up and walked toward her. For a moment, I thought about hugging her, but then I realized I couldn't. I had given her so many chances to fix things, and she had failed every single time. I was done. I'm not ready to forgive you, Nina, I said, my voice firm. I don't think I ever will be. But I'll figure out what's next. For me. For our kids. I just need space. I turned and walked toward the door. The papers will be finalized soon. I'll send someone to pick up my things. As I left the house, I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of relief. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. But there was also a sadness that came with it. I had spent so many years of my life with Nina, and despite everything, I had loved her. But love wasn't enough when trust had been broken beyond repair. The following weeks were a blur of legal meetings, paperwork, and sorting through the pieces of my life. Nina and I maintained a cold but civil relationship for the sake of our kids. Olivia, Henry, and Leland were adjusting to the changes, but I knew they were struggling. I made it a point to be there for them, even if it meant pushing my own feelings aside. Amelia and I kept in touch, though things had changed between us. The weekend getaway in Denver had been a release, but it had also been a reminder of the pain that both of us were still dealing with. She had her own issues with Jace, and I wasn't sure if I could be what she needed. It wasn't until a few months later that I finally realized I needed to focus on myself and my own healing. I had been running away from my feelings, from the anger and the heartbreak, but now I had to face it all. I wasn't sure what the future held, but I knew that moving forward, I couldn't hold on to the past. I began rebuilding my life slowly, focusing on my career, spending time with my kids, and finding a new sense of peace. The journey wasn't easy, but I knew it was the only way to truly move on. Thank you for watching this intense story of love, betrayal, and the quest for truth. What do you think Grant should do next in his journey? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more compelling narratives.